Hey guys, and welcome on into the next NHL season preview show. And today we're going to be talking all about Utah Hockey Club. I'm really hoping that next year there is a different name that I can call them by, but that's a completely different story. But for this year, they'll be known as Utah Hockey Club for this season. And we're going to break down their off season and their upcoming season preview. To do that with me is Gretzky underscore Betzky on Twitter. Make sure to go give him a follow. His Twitter link is in the description below. Give everyone a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll begin the preview.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Gretzky Betzky on Twitter, hockey capper. This will be my fourth season coming up. Part of the Parlay Science Discord, part of the Expected Bets 4 crew. Terry, we're going to need to get you on for some wild previews or to just break down the wild once we get to that point. And I recently started the Clean Hits blog and podcast, which is all things Utah hockey. It's me and a couple friends, and we've just figured we can help kind of bridge that knowledge gap with all the new fans in Utah. We've had some pretty cool things. I don't know if you've checked it out, but we were able to interview Steve Konowalchuk recently, Cole Baudouin, which was a first round pick from the team. So lots of exciting things there. You can find us at Clean Hits Hockey on Twitter and X, and then our blogs at cleanhits.substack.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll have to definitely check it out.
Yeah.
We're going to jump right into it here because Utah actually did some things this offseason. So some teams have quiet off seasons. Some teams have a little bit of a bigger off season. And Utah made some moves here in the off season. I'll begin with this segment, then we'll start with you in the next one for the upcoming free agents. Um, I usually start with subtractions, so I'm going to do that here. The JJ Moser trade. Um, it sucks to lose him, a young guy
Yeah.
who definitely has potential, but we'll get to obviously the addition after. Looking at the Connor Geeky is another guy that was moved by trade that I think Utah will miss a bit. But the remaining guys here are depth
Yeah.
guys that you can move on from. It's not going to hurt the team to move on from any of the five bottom guys, especially with all the youth that Utah has, which is a ton. We'll get to that later. Looking at us additions, I absolutely love the addition of Sergachev. So yes, JJ Moser had to go, Connor Geeky had to go, but you brought in Mikhail Sergachev, which I think is a huge um, piece to the defense for this team, which is something they desperately needed. And I think he's the main guy now on the D line. John Marino is another good depth piece addition. Ian Cole, Kevin Kanaan, and Robert Bertuzzo. So Utah added some D guys.
Yeah.
Not really a whole lot being done in the forward group, but again, we'll get to that later. They don't really have to do too much there. So the main thing that they needed to do their first season heading into Utah was make some changes on the D line, the D pairs, and that's what they did here. What do you think here? Additions and subtractions.
Yeah, obviously the Sergachev trade was huge, and I just kind of broke down a piece on him. I did a little. We're doing preseason rankings for all the players, kind of reviewing their seasons from last year at Clean Hits, and he had an interesting season. He was only on like a 0.45 point per game pace, which was a lot lower than kind of his breakout season the year before. Obviously, only played I think it was 34 games until he had the tibia and fibula injury. But the big thing here is this is the first time he's ever going to be the number one guy in his entire career. It's kind of easy to think of him as this young top defensive prospect or player that has broken out now, but he's always been behind Hedman, and a lot of that was due to the handness. I mean, if Sergachev was a right D, you would kind of wonder if he would have been on the top pairing with Hedman. Obviously, some teams like to mix up and spread out some of their top guys anyways, but he's had a multi-Norris winning defenseman in front of him his entire career outside of 4 games in Montreal. So this is kind of the opportunity of a lifetime for him. I mean, he automatically becomes the top guy. He's on a very young and up and coming team, but he still fits in with some of the initial core guys on the team. Like he's same draft year as Clayton Keller. He went ninth overall, where Keller went sixth, I believe, or seventh. And that means he kind of fits around that Schmaltz age group as well. Marino's around the same age. So he's going to be able to kind of develop as all these other kids and prospects kind of come up through the lineup, especially with some of the big Russian names like Simashev and Boot. That will be probably making their appearance maybe as soon as next season. But again, the biggest thing here is how much this helps with just eating minutes on the blue line, taking the toughest defensive assignments, and kind of helping the depth. And if you look at the additions, five of those names are defensemen. I'm sorry. I don't know if Kevin Connaughton will necessarily be on the team at any point here, but obviously Sergachev, Marino, Ian Cole, Bertuzzo will be playing. Losing JJ Moser does hurt, but I've been able to watch him play since he's been on the team. And I feel like he will kind of cap out as a very solid second pairing guy who can do a little bit of everything. But, he wasn't great on the power play. His offensive upside is, probably in that 30 to 40 point range on a very good team. So I think it was kind of one of those moves that had to be done. And luckily, the addition of Marino and Ian Cole, it just kind of helps solidify the whole unit. I mean, last season, Josh Brown and Travis Dermott were regular guys on this team. It's a big reason why they were 8th worst for goals against per game, and they had the 25th worst penalty kill unit in the league. So I think this really helps them spruce up on the back end, obviously, and more importantly, Sergachev being able to contribute on the power play, Jersey obviously being a good offensive defenseman. We have two options now, where last season it kind of felt like we didn't.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. When you look at it here, I think it's an upgrade.
Yeah.
The team is upgraded here when you look at additions and subtractions. Next up is upcoming free agents, and not a huge list here for Utah when you look at it compared to some other teams. But you've got guys at all three positions here. We'll start with you, Betzky, for this one. What do you think about these upcoming free agents? Who should Utah be focusing most on re-signing, and who would you be okay seeing go elsewhere?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there weren't many additions to the forward group, and that's mostly because a lot of them are pretty young, or they're prospects that have been drafted by Bill Armstrong in the second phase of the rebuild, that are actually making the roster, or guys he's acquired like Jack McBain. Um, so when you look at the forward group, especially with the upcoming free agents, there's a lot of names here that I'm not too concerned if they leave. Michael Carcone had a fantastic season last year. I think he put up 21 goals, came out of nowhere, but he's a bit on the older side. It was his technically first full season in the NHL. If he goes somewhere else, it's not going to be a huge issue. Same thing for somebody like Alex Kerfoot, who, again, nice kind of jack of all trades type player, can play up and down the lineup. But at some point here, we need to make some room for all the forwards that are going to be knocking on the door next year, like Josh Stone, potentially Daniel Boot. Matthias Matika was fantastic at DU last season. He'll be in the Roadrunners organization this year, but he could be a guy that's looking to make that next step. Even a guy like Sokolov, who we got from trading Yanin Eek, maybe somebody who can kind of crack the lineup next season. So looking at this list, I'm not really concerned about anyone here outside of Jack McBain and Dylan Gunther, who I think will both be retained. And obviously Gunther will probably get a nice payday going into next season. He was on point 33 goals per game pace last season. McBain is a really nice depth center, huge bruising type who can pot in goals. And then I guess the big question mark here is Nick Bukestad and Vejmelka, though. Bukestad's been an integral part since he's came over. Was a free agent signing a couple seasons ago, got traded to Edmonton for Michael Kesselring, who is now a roster player, and just turned right around and re-signed with the team last offseason. So he's been really beneficial and with the center depth and kind of helping the young guys kind of bridge and find their way on the team. But it'll be interesting to see if the team wants to make a bigger move for a potential 2, 3C player going into next offseason. And I think Barrett Hayton is going to be a big factor in what the team does with Bukestad.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree. Bukestad was a surprise. I think
Yeah.
I didn't really expect him to do so well in Arizona. Um,
Yeah, you knew him well
McBain,
for the Minnesota
yeah,
connections and everything, and it's been phenomenal to see him kind of finally have a breakout almost this many years after, his rookie seasons.
yeah, for sure. Jack McBain
Yeah, you
didn't
know
want to
Big
play
Bane as
for
well.
Minnesota.
Yeah,
Didn't want to play there, so he ended up getting traded, and now he is in Utah. So we'll see how he does this season. Dylan Guenther, obviously, his picture is over there for a reason.
yeah,
I think it's incredibly important that he gets re-signed. He is an RFA, so most likely, unless St. Louis says, "Hey, we're gonna do an offer sheet,"
yeah,
he should be good to resign in Utah. And Michael Corconi, I cashed on him a few times last year.
yeah,
He was a good plus 275, sometimes plus 450. I think it's sometime like he was a great goal scorer prop last
I
year.
feel like he
So
had a 5-game goal scoring streak too, it was crazy.
yeah, exactly, and that's when I was on him because I
Yep,
ride the streak. So he had a great season last year. Like you said, we'll have to see exactly how his season does, how it goes this year. That'll
yeah,
determine whether or not he gets re-signed for next year. Ian Cole, Robert Pertuzzo,
yeah,
two good physical depth guys on the defense. We'll see where Utah goes when it gets to the trade deadline. These guys could be moved. They could be
yep,
looking at other guys in free agency. You can definitely still improve the defense. So these two guys may find themselves somewhere else. And Vejmelka is the wild card here.
I agree.
Um, when I was doing the preview, getting everything ready for the previews, I was doing the future bets. They have Ingram wins, but they don't have Vejmelka. So we'll see what happens with Vejmelka. Uh, if I was a team looking to improve my goaltending, I would take a shot with him because
Mhm.
he has done very well uh, when he was with Arizona, and we'll see how he does with Utah this year. So he's a wild card, I think, is
I would
fair to
agree.
say.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree. And his first season when he came over to Arizona, he was much better than last year. Last year, he struggled a little bit with consistency, but he's that type of goaltender that can have those huge games that he can absolutely steal a win at times. And you know that's tempting for other teams in the league, especially for maybe cap strap teams. I mean, kind of think like he could look really good in Carolina or a team that can kind of have a 1A to 1B type tandem, maybe LA, something like that, where they need a cheap goaltender who can win games, who can play big games, even though the consistency may not always be there, but maybe they think their system can really improve his play.
Yeah, the defense in front of him, and then goalies are weird because they
Yeah.
have bad seasons, but then the next year they're lights out. So goalies are a bit weird, I guess
Yep.
is the fair thing to say. Next up is possible lineup. So this is done by depth charts that I've looked at for Utah in this upcoming season. So this may not be the opening night lineup. There might be lots of changes. We'll have to see overall. But this is a projection of what
Yeah.
this upcoming season could look like. So that top line, Schmaltz, Hayden Keller, what can be said about them except they performed very well last year. Definitely good for point props.
Yeah.
Keller, of course, was more goal props, but um, still very profitable betting his goal props last season. That second line with Cooley and Guenther, those are two guys that I'm going to be looking at this year to see if they take a big step forward after their seasons last year. And that third line, absolutely love it. Absolutely love that third line. And people might be sleeping on Utah a little bit this year,
I
but I
agree.
really like their off. I really like the forward group.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be targeting a lot of these guys for player props this season. Michelli and Doan, I love those two together. Bukestad, we already talked about, has really
Hmm.
done well with Arizona and now Utah. So we'll see how he fits with those guys on that line. And then that fourth line, having Alexander Kerfoot on your fourth line isn't a horrible thing.
No.
I think he could definitely be on the third line on a lot of other teams. You've got Stenlin there, and then Carcone, who, if he continues to play like he did last year, that gives you an offensive weapon on the fourth line. Jack McBain is there. You're really high on him. He might most likely take that fourth line spot. Liam O'Brien as well is there. And then there's other guys that aren't even on the sheet that could be fighting for roster spots. So when it comes to the forward group, I see money. I see
Yeah.
money because I see a lot of these guys being having a lot of value on their props as well, especially early on in the season. So Utah is definitely a team I have my eye on. Team totals as well. I'll be looking at for
Uh,
Utah.
Definitely agree. I think team totals is going to be kind of the play here. Circle Nick Schmaltz for assists, Clayton Keller for his goal. Clayton Keller was becoming a lot more consistent with his shots on goal prop too. Barrett Hayton Point there will just kind of be a nice little trifecta if that top line sticks together like that, because Hayton almost was a point per game at one point 2 seasons ago, kind of in the last quarter of the season. Gunther's shots, I think, is going to be a lot better this season, a lot more consistent, because I think he was starting to figure out that the shot volume really helps getting pucks in the back of the net by the end of the season. Tack on Logan Cooley goal there, or I'm sorry, assist there, and you got a couple pairs of players here that you can be really profiting with. Michelli obviously was a great point prop for a lot of last season. I mean, this will be potentially his third season where he's hovering around that 55 to 65 points. And he's kind of streaky. So you're able to kind of just grab him when he's hot. And then it's usually around plus money for his point, which is nice because he's a little bit lesser known of a player. Josh Doan will be interesting. I'm not 100% sure he's making the team right out of camp. It may be something where we see Carcone up on that third line with Jack McBain playing on the fourth line. And then as soon as injuries hit, maybe Doan moves up. Maybe somebody comes knocking on the door for Michael Carcone if they lose somebody and want to fill in kind of a roster spot. But it should be interesting to see how that all plays out. And then the defenseman, I actually think Marino will probably play on the top pair with Sergachev just to kind of have that really defensive, responsible guy to be able to kind of allow Sergachev to have a longer leash, which again leads into point props for both him and Jersey. I think they'll be able to fly around the ice a little bit more if they're kind of separate, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, if they have great chemistry right from the get-go, and you never know. Now, one thing I was talking to my friend about too is defensemen can take a while to kind of get that chemistry and find their footing, especially on new teams, new systems, having a new pairing. And I could see that they allow a lot of goals at the beginning of the season. So it may be one of those things where you're looking at the overs as well as those team totals. And then as that unit gets a little bit more used to playing with each other, they tighten things up. So I think this is going to be a kind of run and gun team, maybe in the first quarter of the season, and then things will kind of shore up a little bit.
That sounds good to me. That
Yep.
sounds good to me because I'm already looking at point props and team totals, overs as well, depending on how the goalies do, depending on their opponent as well. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm already looking at all that stuff. So run and gun offense sounds excellent to me for this upcoming season. My thoughts on the defense is there's question marks,
Yeah.
but there is definitely a possibility that things could go well. There's definitely possibility here, and also you could never rule out any trades later on in the season. If Utah's in that bubble spot, maybe there's a deal made. Maybe they improve things here. The goalies, so many goaltenders. There's so many question marks with goalies
Agreed.
on different teams. Connor Ingram here will likely be the starter out of the gate, but I don't think it's crazy to say that if he struggles and Vejmelka is hot,
Yep.
I think you could see that switch. I don't think it's written in stone that Ingram has a safe job and the net's his. I definitely think we could see some movement. What do you think about that?
Completely agree. I mean, Ingram had a really nice season last year. He had 6 shutouts, which I think was in the top 5 for goaltenders. But like you mentioned before, goaltenders are really hard to predict. And I almost, unless you're kind of in that top 10 tier of goaltenders, it's really kind of a up and down career trajectory. It seems really difficult for goaltenders to kind of play extremely consistent and kind of follow up seasons. Um, from one year to a next, especially when they may not be used to taking on a true starter's workload. And I don't believe Ingram really has hit that yet. So he could be tested a little bit more this season, and they may be playing him a little bit more frequently. And you don't know how the goaltender is going to react to that, really. And again, Vejmelka is a decent enough option who can steal games. So it could be a lot of back and forth here. It's not something I would be like necessarily looking forward to for their wins options for any props there, but could be sneaky
Well,
good too.
yeah, yeah, they could be like that's what we don't really know.
Yeah.
So that's what. And before we get to the win total the per players and that, a perfect segues into our next segment, which is team future bets. Here, um, right off the bat, the top four, I'm not looking at for Utah.
No,
Uh,
no.
I think if they did any of those top four things, I think that would be shocking, and it would be very surprising to see any of those top four things happen. Now, make playoffs at plus 175. I'm high on Utah. I really like Utah this season, and nothing against Arizona, but
Mhm.
you have to look at the players coming to a new city where there's going to be a lot of fans, a lot of excited fans that are getting to see hockey for the first time, and you have to look at the different arenas they're going to be playing in now, and you can't compare.
Yep.
You can't compare it. In Arizona, you'll agree with me, Betzky. When I watched Wild games in Arizona, you heard "Let's Go Wild" chants
Yep.
loudly in Arizona. So the Arizona's future in the NHL is a whole other video. But I'm not against another team coming. But we need a good owner. We need a much better. You need a much better
Yep.
owner, and you need a much more stable situation. But that's for a whole other video. But I'm why I brought it up is I think you could look at improvement across the board. I think coming to a new city and playing in front of a full arena with fans. So when it comes to the make playoffs, I think there's value. Now, if you guys have been watching the NHL preview shows for the other teams, you know I've said it multiple times already. The Central is tough. It is a tough, tough division. A lot of teams improved in the Central. Um, 87 and a half points. Uh, Arizona had 77 last year. So you would be looking at an 11-point increase. And I'm not sure about the 87 and a half points for Utah. I do like them to improve a lot this year. And that's why I would probably go with the make playoffs instead. Now, if they're making the playoffs, they're probably going to hit over 88 points, but I like the value with the plus 175. So anything on this page, I would sprinkle on make playoffs if you think Utah's going to have a good season. 90, 100, 110 points, not going to happen. Least points in the NHL, not going to happen. I've seen some people that are kind of low on Utah this year, but I do not think that they will be anywhere close to the bottom. I think they'll be much closer to a playoff spot than they will the bottom of the Western Conference. Betsky, what do you think here about the team future bets for Utah?
Yeah, I actually think that points over looks really good, to be honest. So yeah, they had 77 points last year, but they lost 14 games in a row when all the rumors started. So they were actually kind of knocking at the door of the playoffs or a wild card spot and up till January. And I apparently that is where the league started getting very nervous because they were potentially going to be playing in the playoffs in a 5,000 capacity rink. So I think there was some projection that if it didn't happen last year, there was a good chance that it could happen the following year. And with all the ownership issues, that was starting to become a huge concern. The playoffs are going to be tricky. I do like the value there as well. I almost want to wait to see if they lose a couple games early and they can get that closer to double your money. But plus 175 is not bad value there. Really, they're going to probably most likely be battling for that last wild card spot from LA. That's kind of the way I view it. And I would say Utah improved more so than LA did this offseason. I would say that LA actually took quite a few hits, losing Sean Walker, losing Arvidsson. Talbot has moved on. I think the Kemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois trade was decent, but you're kind of banking on Kemper having a good year. I don't know. I think that's really going to be that route to the playoffs is through taking LA's spot. And quite frankly, I think they have a decent enough shot for that to happen to where I like that. No team made the playoffs last year under 91 points, I believe. So if you like them to get over 87 points, I would almost prefer just taking them to make the playoffs, especially taking the 90 point plus points. At that point, they're almost going to be a shoe in. So why not just get it for almost double your money? So yeah, I like that look too. I think all the other ones are a much bigger long shot. I mean, if you want to sprinkle win the division, you're kind of banking on Colorado to have injury issues again. Winnipeg to maybe have some issues with Hellebuck, or Nashville having maybe not as much chemistry as they had hoped from bringing all those players in. And then obviously you would have to get around Dallas. So not a huge fan of that.
Yeah,
100
you would need a
points.
lot of things to go. That's why I said it's
Yeah,
not now. But
not now.
this team is young, and in a few years, we could be talking about a different story
Yep.
with those
Yep.
top four. We'll
Uh,
move into the. Oh yeah, go ahead.
the only other one that would maybe interest me there is that the 100 plus points. It's kind of crazy to think, but the Kraken had 100 points when they made the playoffs 2 years ago. So maybe it's one of those things that they just come out the gates running. They get the kind of home court advantage because of the altitude and the new rink and the new fans and everything. But that's very risky too. So making the playoffs is my favorite prop there.
Awesome. We're in agreement there. And then Ryan Smith, the new owner, obviously,
Yep.
of Utah, has not been afraid to spend money. So
Yep.
I could see trades. I could see this team doing a lot of different things. So I would. This is a team I have very positive things to say. Which, when I'm looking at Central Division rivals of the Wild, most of the time I'm not really saying too many positive things, but I've got nothing but positive things to say about Utah. We'll go here to this segment. I'll let you start first with this one. What do you think here about these player point props? Does anything catch your eye here?
Keller over 81.5 points is one that immediately stands out. Again, this offense should be better. It was 15th in the league last year. The power play was actually 15th as well. The addition to Sergachev should really help the power play kind of have more options for a quarterback, just have better 2 units. I mean, when you looked at those forward groups, you're talking about guys like Michelli and Krause who are potentially on the second power play unit, or even a guy like Schmaltz on the second power play unit. So should be really interesting. Keller has been phenomenal these last 2 seasons. He had a great rookie season and then kind of had some slumps, kind of a sophomore slump, and Rick Tocchet years, he was kind of being forced to play a little bit more two-way, but he's really rounded out his game now. And he's had, I believe it's 2 30-plus goal seasons already. I like the points here a little bit more so than the goals. If Hayton has a healthy season and can really contribute right away, he may be able to kind of steal some of those goals from being right up front in the net. Love the Cooley points as well. So Cooley kind of had a tale of 2 seasons here, where the beginning of the season, it took him a while to adjust. This has kind of been the name of the game for his entire career. So his first year and only year at University of Minnesota started off slow. by the end of the season, his last half, he was almost at 2 points per game. Same thing kind of happened at all of his developmental levels. And this is actually the first time in his entire young hockey career where he's been at the same level of a hockey program 2 years in a row. So I think he'll be much more acclimated to the league. He'll have Gunther on his side potentially the whole season this year, where last year Gunther didn't really come back up to the team until December, January. And still he had 45 points in his rookie season. So I think a 10-point jump here is pretty reasonable to expect. I don't know if he'll be able to do that 25 goals. That one would make me a little bit more worried. And then I love the Gunther points as well here. That would be something I'm going to jump on. I'll be interested to see if they do release a goal line. But the rest of these obviously make me a little bit more worried outside of that last one. That Andre Tournier, Jack Adams award may be my favorite offseason futures bet for the team, because new hockey franchise, what better way to award the team at the NHL awards than giving them maybe not a player award, because I don't think we're really looking at a Sergachev Norris. I think the Josh Doan Calder is going to be a hard one to potentially get to. I don't think anybody's on this team's winning the Hart or the Rocket or anything like that, but nice way to award the team, especially if they make the playoffs, than giving them Coach of the Year. So that is something I've already jumped on. I absolutely love it. I think it's maybe my favorite bet for the offseason.
Awesome. I agree. Yeah, if they make the playoffs, he's going to be that plus 600, plus 1600 is going to be gone.
Yeah.
He's going to be much more like +4, +3. Like you'll see it move throughout the season. I do disagree with you on one thing, which we'll get to here
Okay.
shortly. Keller, I like his over points. I do, being on this top line. And like I said, I think being in front of a full arena with fans, I think is definitely going to have an impact. And then I'm with you on Cooley and Gunther points. Cooley had 44 points in 82 games last year. I agree with that 10-point jump here in his second season. He's only going to improve going forward. Gunther had 35 points in only 45 games played last season. And now his prop here is at 55.5.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite props
Yeah.
for Utah is Gunther over on his points. Michelli, he had 57 points last season. He is going to be on that third line most likely for the most part, so I don't really like his point prop. Ingram, we kind of discussed with how the goaltending is here. I want to be looking at his win total over or under. Under, if he has a great season, he's the starting goalie. He can definitely hit over. If he doesn't have a good season, he could be finding himself as a backup or kind of a split and not hit the total. So no play there for me. But I disagree with you. I love Josh Doan.
Yeah.
I think
like to hear
Utah
that.
is crazy if they do not start him in the starting lineup on day one. I loved everything I saw from him last year. I am so high on this kid. He is my Calder pick for this season. I don't do multiple ones. I'm just doing one to start off the season, but it's Josh Doan. I absolutely love him.
I will ride with you on that one. I mean, being a
Plus
fan of the team.
5,000.
Yeah.
If he does make the team, if he does play like he did last year, going to what did he do last year?
He had 5 goals in 11 games.
9 points in 11
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
Utah is insane if he's not in the starting lineup. So
I
love Josh Doan.
There's a chance he's on a line with Cooley and Gunther. Like there's a chance that he actually maybe takes Schmaltz's spot on the top line. The options are kind of endless because of the way this forward depth is. So yeah, I mean it's
Exactly. And it's
definitely
not
worth
like
the
going to be
odds.
it's not a full unit play for me.
Yeah,
But I am betting Josh Stone Calder. I'm releasing it to my clients as well on
I will sprinkle
Capitec.
that.
I absolutely love Josh Stone this offseason. I think there's a ton of value at plus 5,000 in this Calder field because there's a lot of other guys. It's a much more open race this year. So
I'd have to agree. And to
That's
help your case too, he was just seen wearing the full Utah kit at some NHL media showcase today. So they're definitely having him represent the team a little bit, which maybe that means he's is a shoe in more so than we think.
Yeah, it's going to depend on his training camp. But again, when you were kind of saying that maybe he doesn't make the open night roster, I was thinking like, oh, what? He should absolutely make the opening right. In my opinion, he should make.
I would agree. I think it's if we didn't have the depth we did, I think he'd be a shoe in. I think it's just more of can we actually carry two extra forwards every night? I've
Yeah.
been kind of keeping my fingers crossed that they move Carcone to a cap strap team for a third round pick or something.
Okay. We're filming this now on September 4th.
Hmm.
So who knows what's going to happen before the video gets released, and then what happens before the season started.
Yep.
Uh, but anything else you want to say before we finish off the show?
No, I think this is going to be one of those teams to circle. There's always a couple of these teams that have a higher offensive output than a lot of the books are expecting. They have players up and down the lineup who contribute. I think of Ottawa last year, or the past 2 years, where those player props were always undervalued. So some of those teams that don't quite get the same amount of love as the bigger teams in the league that also can put them in the back of the net. Those are the ones I love to kind of ride as far as props throughout the season. The Coyotes kind of about midway through the season last year were one of those teams you could do that with. This year, I think they're going to be even more plentiful for all the different prop options you can get from here.
Awesome. I absolutely love it. I'm looking forward to it. Everyone, go give Betzky a follow. The link to his Twitter/X is in the description below. So make sure to go give him a follow. And welcome to the NHL, Utah. I'm
Yep.
excited for their season debut, and I'm excited to make money on them this season.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Well, thanks
watching,
for
guys.
having me, Terry. It's always such a pleasure talking to you about all things hockey gambling. So,
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you on future shows. Thanks,
cool.
guys.